Hello there, folks. I'm Dan Brown from a sort of interesting life.com. You're joining me on board good old narrowboat Tilly, and today we're going to have one of the Dan Brown monologues, my ongoing weekly video series where I talk about random things with help of the stainless steel pan of random topics. So without further ado, let's give it a shake up, hold it above head height, dive in, have a swirl around, and then let's draw out our random topic for the day, which is astronomy. And my goodness me, am I happy to be talking about this topic. Oh, right, so astronomy and why I love it. I suppose really I should give you some sort of background first before we dive into this. This is the only thing with trying to do these topics at random out of the thing, that I have to have just these few seconds to figure out how's this video going to go. But please do give me your suggestions for topics to throw in the pan of random topics, and well, we will throw them in to dive into later on. Anyway, getting on to astronomy. So to put everything in some sort of order and sequence of how I came to love astronomy the way that I do, in the same way that I've always loved history and learning about old stuff, I've always loved the stars and everything that's above us and like the scale of it all and just the amount of stuff that's up there, and especially how that puts everything else into perspective in many ways. But growing up, I was always interested in like medieval history and ancient history, and it wasn't really until leaving proper education and then moving into my early 20s and that I started to really learn properly about medieval history and Rome and Greece and Egypt, and learn properly real sort of in-depth stuff about all that sort of stuff. And don't worry, history is a topic in this pan, which we'll talk of in similar gushing terms in some future video. But astronomy was never quite that sort of prominent, but I always was fascinated, and when there was stuff on the telly it was like, wow, look at this is incredible. And I just loved it's been like almost more of the fascination and the fact that it's so big and you can never know what's out there truly and all that. And really what properly sparked my real adult life interest and active pursuit of astronomy as a hobby was I think it was the 2000 Christmas in 2010, if I say that as an actual sentence. My dad bought me a small beginner's telescope, the Celestron First Scope it was. Only a tiny little tabletop thing, not on like a proper tripod or anything like super fancy, or even really something that looked like a telescope in many respects, or certainly not how you traditionally view them. I'll leave a link in the description to what they're like on Amazon. And I just remember me and my friends Helena and Jono going out on Christmas Day. That was the Christmas Day that they stopped at my mum's house, and it was just us three in the house, and my mum went and stopped out. Crazy times, but there was snow on the ground, and it was really a brilliant winter for astronomy because there was so much really cold weather and so many brilliant skies, like just beautiful clear skies. And I remember we took the telescope up onto the local hill fort in the snow, and we were trying to line up the moon, but because we didn't have a clue what we were doing, and trying to adjust the telescope because everything's a mirror image of what's actually out there, it made it really difficult as a total novice to do it. Then I accidentally knocked the telescope with my knee off a fence post into the snow, and that obviously didn't do it any good at all, so we had to abandon that. But I remember just the first time looking at the moon and seeing it like close up and being like, wow, look at that. And then as time went on, as the shadow passed across the moon and you see different craters along the edge of the shadow, just amazing scenery. And the fact that the moon itself changes from night to night, obviously assuming it's up and visible in the night, but sometimes I've looked at it in the day, but it's just not quite the same. But oh my goodness me, my voice nearly went then. I'll just have a quick drink. Right then, now I've had a drink, I'm back and ready to go. To summarise, the moon is quite good to look at with a telescope. But the thing that really, really gripped me and just absolutely boggled my mind was, and I can remember this so clearly, being at my mum's house with this telescope on the windowsill downstairs in the dining room, and just looking up through the glass, not in like perfect conditions or anything, like literally in the town centre as well, so nowhere near the amazing conditions and the incredible amount of stars that taking away the light pollution then reveals to you. but still, just looking up for the first time at the Seven Sisters, or the Pleiades, however it's pronounced, and where your eye, if you're lucky, you can see 7 stars and like a bit of a sort of faint white blob, sort of blur of light, like a smudge, I always describe it. And through the telescope, those 7 stars suddenly were just, I don't know how many it was, but it was just like dozens upon dozens upon dozens. And seeing that, even in the light pollution, like I say, with a small beginner's telescope, it was the most incredible thing. And I just remember having like this sense of like quiet and sort of like, wow, look how much stuff is up there. That's unbelievable. And that was really the real moment. I remember shouting my mum to come and look, and then she looked through it and it was like, oh yeah, wow, that's amazing. And so from then, I got more and more into looking at different things like that to look at. And of course, you've got things like the Orion Nebula and all of these things that are sort of from the common, like the more well-known constellations like Orion and the Plough, or Ursa Major. It's got a lot more stars in the Plough that make it look, I say look, make it relatively look like a stick figure version of a bear, maybe. But as I got more and more into it and learned all the names of different constellations, I mean, Cygnus and Cassiopeia, and the like smudge of light that cuts through the top of the sky, well, obviously depending on the time of the year, but the smudge of light that cuts through the sky, it's like looking edgeways through the galaxy, and all of these different things that I learned to point a telescope into, and then suddenly started to see, quite literally, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of stars that the naked eye couldn't see. I just could not believe what was out there. And that then got me looking more and more, and looking at all these different things like the Beehive cluster in, I think that's in the Cancer constellation, and all of these different things that even naked eye can't really pick up the little smudge or blur that there might be something there. But then pointing even a small telescope and it was like, wow, this is amazing. And it was that sense of, I suppose, just total discovery from complete ignorance that I'd been in before. And just being able to have something so simple like a telescope. And as some of you may know, I've got, at the moment, I'm in the process of selling and then buying a small, well, selling my current telescope, which is a 130mm lens on a wooden mount and that. So it's quite heavy in that, and what I like to do with one of my telescopes that I had, a very small lightweight telescope, the Celestron Travel Scope 70, that I used to take up hills and stuff with me to use in the daytime, and I've been missing that recently, so I'm going to downgrade to a smaller telescope, but you can still see, like I say, thousands upon thousands of stars up there with these telescopes. But obviously less than the bigger telescope. But it's just the convenience of this Celestron travel scope that means I can take it up places to view for literally miles upon miles around with, well, in the daytime basically. And again, that's a whole other issue, and me and my friends have taken a massive pair of astronomy binoculars up Rodney's Pillar, one of the local hills that you might have seen in these videos, and literally being able to see my mum walking around the front of the house through these binoculars from over 9 miles away. And my mum's not a particularly big woman, so that's not saying anything about her size when I say we could see it from 9.5 miles away. But you get the general gist, so that's why I'm going to downgrade to a smaller telescope for like terrestrial daytime viewing. Sorry about the cut in the video here, as I just did a big sneeze, so we've cut that out. But getting back on track, it was that initial sense of there's literally so much to discover, and as the year passes and the different constellations rise and set and different things come into view, it was just a constant thing of like, as I was learning more and more and going through, I believe it's pronounced the Messier List, I hope so, it's spelt Messier but I'm assuming that it's French, but basically that's a list of loads, like over 100 deep space objects, so that you can like go out and see if you can tick them all off, that are all viewable with relatively small telescopes. And so going through all those and then learning that there were some I was going to have to wait months to be able to see because the constellations weren't going to be up in the night hours for ages, and just all of that just initial thing was like, wow, this is incredible. But then when I'm actually out there looking at the stars and looking through a telescope, because so much of this happened in nice, quiet, remote places, there were two particular spots that I would take my telescope out to. There was the Iron Age hill fort from the Christmas Day snow disaster, which is on one side of town, and then on the other side of our street there's a place called Middleton Pool, where I'd literally take my telescope and just set it up on the little jetty that was literally just a little wooden platform on a small little lake. And it's like, you'd just see nobody out at these places. And of course, because I was there at these ridiculous hours of the night sometimes, it was even quieter and more serene, and you'd hear like the roads in the distance, and it was like, oh, look at that, people are going about their lives, and we're just here looking up at the stars, and the whole sense of calm and relaxation and almost a sort of zen-like meditative, like, we're just looking and then lining up, and then things start to slowly move out of view, and it was just incredible. But the thing that then, on top of all this time like looking through the telescope, amazed me was how many shooting stars there are out there. And the shooting star thing, just, I mean, the amount that I have seen, I've literally seen hundreds at the very least, because for a good period of my life I was going out like practically every night of the week sometimes, but just going out and spending hours and hours and hours a week out looking at the sky. And that first winter, having the perfect sort of cold weather to keep the skies really clear, and then getting out of the light pollution so you can see all the faint shooting stars as well as the prominent ones, and then every now and then you get one that leaves a little fire trail for a split second across the sky. And there's just so many things like that, and so many of these tiny little meteors going on, that it boggled my mind. And when I was telling people, and they were going, oh, you're so lucky, I can't believe it, I've never seen one in my life, and I was like, well, neither had I really. It was only the fact that now I spend so much time out there that they actually are happening pretty commonly, and they're not this super rare thing that I always thought they were. And that then led me to start going out without a telescope, and I'd literally going down to the jetty at Middleton Pool with blankets and something to put my head on. I was listening to the History of Rome podcast at the time, when it was still actually going out live week after week. And I'd literally just go out there, listen to podcasts, and be lying completely flat on my back under a blanket, just watching shooting stars. And honestly, I just cannot explain to you the sort of calm sense of relaxation and the total sort of nothing else exists in the world apart from this moment now. And that, I suppose, again, has led me more and more into this sort of attempted quiet life, which I completely derailed with all this YouTube stuff, admittedly. But I hope that comes across, like, that it's that whole thing of, well, the experience. I used to be interested in it, as in, like, a fascination with, wow, it's so big, and look at this, it's massive, and all that sort of thing. Then you've got that sort of extra thing when I got the telescope of, oh my goodness me, I never knew there were all these stars up there, and they are just amazing to look at. Then you get the, what's going on? There's all these shooting stars as well, and then add into all that the general sense of calm and relaxation, and sort of, I suppose really, one of the things I always say too is how it puts everything into perspective of what's really important, what matters, how important are you and your life really in the grand scheme of things, when we're just one planet floating around one star that goodness knows how many trillions of stars there are out there. And the thing that I always have quoted is looking at the Andromeda galaxy. And even though in the telescope it just comes up as a tiny little smudge of white light, it's just mind-boggling to think that you're looking at something that's, I think it's 2.5 million light years away. It's got 1 trillion stars in it, so that's 1 trillion of our suns, if you want to consider it another way, with all the potential of how many planets they might have each on average or not. And just considering that as 1 trillion stars, that's 2.5 million light years away, so we can never get there or communicate with them as far as we know, and certainly in our lifetime the technology's unlikely to be developed that rapidly, if ever at all, if we can manage even to just keep this one planet going and not destroy each other or the world, which unfortunately is a sort of bittersweet thought of how far humanity's come, and now how easy it is for us to destroy ourselves at the flick of a switch if somebody so wished. But moving away from that depressing topic, adding in that concept of, wow, I'm here on this little planet as one individual tiny speck of a person looking up out of all the billions of people on Earth to something that's containing 1 trillion stars. And again, on top of that, if you consider there's the fascinating thing that in like billions of years' time, it's going to collide with the Milky Way. So one day, if humanity could last for billions of years, again, highly unlikely, but just consider the Milky Way and Andromeda, 2 entire galaxies of over 1 trillion stars. I mean, I think it's Milky Way like 350 billion stars, something like that. Again, don't quote me on these numbers, but just consider that as you've got 2 entire galaxies. The galaxy we're in right now will one day collide with another galaxy, and just all of the planets and the gravity and every possible thing of the laws of physics of 2 galaxies hitting each other. I don't even know how that works, and the fact that the process isn't going to be like a sudden impact. It's going to go on for, again, I can even imagine, like forever, I assume, for all intents and purposes, to a human's lifetime. And these are the sorts of things that just, well, as you've probably guessed and gathered from the way that I've ridiculously gone over the top and probably waved my arms around more than ever in this video, this is why I love astronomy. It's humbling, it's thought-provoking, it's calming and relaxing. It's absolutely beautiful to look even through a small telescope at these incredible clusters of stars out there. And like I say, if you point the telescope around the Cassiopeia, Cygnus, those sorts of constellations that are in the sort of cloud of the edge of the galaxy that you're looking sideways through it, then you start to see just thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of stars. And it's just truly breathtaking to see that. And just in general, it's quite interesting. Right then, thank you so much for watching this video. Man, I've really gone and gone and gone on this. I wasn't expecting to be here looking at a 20-minute video file to edit. Sorry about the cuts and the randomness of it getting steadily darker, as I started recording this just before sunset, so it's gotten extremely dark compared to how it originally was when I started filming, so my apologies on that. But please do check out my other videos for loads of boat life and scenery and stuff from the countryside and the canals. Feel free, if you want to help me out, to check out my short boat life books for the Kindle. Search Amazon for the Narrowboat Lad. I'll find links to them all in the description. Well, you're looking at the links in the description. Please do consider adding me on Facebook or liking the Facebook page. Or don't worry, you don't have to add me on Facebook. You can follow me and that and all this sort of stuff. I post loads of photos from the canal that some people seem to enjoy, so maybe you will too. But ultimately though, keep reaching for the stars, keep it boat worthy, and of course, farewell.